We have been told that there are no survivors.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a tragic and mysterious story to discuss. The devastating mid-air collision that occurred on January 29, 2025 over the Potomac River near Washington, D.C. This shocking event involved an American Airlines passenger jet and a U.S. American Black Hawk helicopter. Tragically, all 67 individuals aboard both aircraft lost their lives, but there is more to this story than just an accident. Eyewitnesses are describing unusual sighting in the sky, and speculation is growing about what really happened. Was this a simple aviation mishap, or is there something deeper going on? Let's break it all down.
We have been told that there are no survivors. We mourn with all those who have been impacted. This is a terrible tragedy that will unite those in Washington, D.C. and Wichita, Kansas forever.
Have you spoken to any of the families of the victims of the plane crash?
I don't want to comment on that.
Do you have a plan to go visit the site or meet with any of the
I have a
first
plan
responders?
to visit, not the site, because
So Donald Trump just made a joke about swimming with the victims of the plane crash. Here is how he responded to a reporter who asked him in the Oval Office if he has any plans of visiting the site. Quote, "I have a plan to visit, not the site, because you tell me, what's the site? The water? Do you want me to go swimming?" End quote. No, Donald, she's asking you because you are the president of the United States if you are going to pay a visit to the site, maybe to hold a press conference to inform the American people about information you may have about what happened. So that is the president of the United States making a sarcastic remark about a plane and helicopter collision in which there were 64 passengers on the plane and 3 passengers on the helicopter without any survivors being reported, but the president feels it is appropriate to joke about going swimming with the victims of the crash. He's so unpresidential, it hurts.
There was a group of young people on that flight, and they were a part of the U.S. figure skating team. So there was family members and coaches. They were just coming back from Kansas competing in a championship. We don't know the exact number of how many were on board, but we do know that they were on that flight. And what's so crazy about this, I just read an article saying in 1961, something similar happened, where there was 18 members of the U.S. figure skating team. They were in a plane crash, and all 18 members of the team, plus their family members and coaches, passed away, similar to this story. Again, RIP to everyone who passed away, and I'm just praying for their family members, especially for those who were sitting at the airport waiting for their loved ones to walk off of that plane. Devastating. And I just hope that all of the first responders are able to find everyone, and I hope the investigation will reveal what actually happened, and so the families can be at peace, because this is a tragedy. I'm definitely going to be following this story and provide some updates on my page.
Y'all, something is not adding up about this crash that happened in Washington, D.C. Y'all need to take a listen to what this eyewitness said he seen before the crash happened. And then I'm going to tell you my input on why this is all suspicious. And once again, I want to give my condolence to everyone who was affected in this tragic event that happened last night at 9 p.m. But y'all, take a listen.
Tonight, I was just with my girlfriend at the park, at Gravelly Point Park, right next to Reagan National Airport, and we were eating dinner, just as normal, taking in a nice view. And
Watch what you say,
noticed
y'all.
the planes started having irregular patterns, and they all kind of dispersed from their regular landing patterns. And then we looked up in the sky before that, and we saw these white flare.
What do you think when you saw these white flares?
We didn't think much of it. We thought they were like shooting stars. I don't know. I couldn't really explain it, but...
So y'all heard what he said, right? It looked like shooting stars. So now I ask myself, I'm seeing the picture of the plane that crashed, but I was looking everywhere for the helicopter. I have yet to see any pictures of the helicopter that crashed into this airplane. So if someone's seen it, tag me in it, send it to my inbox or anything. I'm telling y'all, I have not seen the picture yet. And then, like I said, even if it was a helicopter, how does it happen? Air traffic control should not have let that happen. It don't make sense.
I'm hearing the Black Hawk was P-25 important cargo. What does this all mean? P-25 stands for priority transport, priority air transport. And if it was leaving the CIA operation building in Langley and coming to the area of Alexandria, Virginia, as well as the area of that, ignore the 3 soldiers, something was on that plane.
You expect me to believe that a Black Hawk helicopter collided with an American Airlines flight in DC's most monitored and secure airspace? An American Eagle flight that was en route from Wichita, Kansas? Does anybody know about what's happening in Kansas right now? You know, a major tuberculosis, you know what outbreak? Putting that aside, I just so happened to track the helicopter's path as well before you were unable to all of a sudden. And boy, did I discover a lot of very interesting information, but we'll get to that here in a second. Do you know how many Russians alone were on that flight? And do keep in mind, no one is believed to actually have survived that mid-air collision. But I really shouldn't have to say much more considering they were Russian personnel. Now let's do keep in mind, okay, there has been reported to be 3 U.S. military personnel that were on board the helicopter. No names have been released as of yet, but this is the really interesting part. When you were able to track the helicopter's flight path, it just so happened to originate from a very specific address. Current owners are the Embassy of Saudi Arabia. And when I noticed that, my instant reaction was, what? What is a Black Hawk helicopter doing taking off from that location? And does anybody remember the Las Vegas incident? Because if you don't, and you haven't gone down that rabbit hole already, I highly suggest that you do. But there are numerous Saudi Arabian diplomats and scholars residing at that address. And like I stated, I'm going to be putting it in the comment section below so you can actually go check that out for yourself.
How are you remembering your son today?
I consider Sam a spirit that was living in an earthly body, and now he's back in his spirit body. And as a follower of Jesus, I will someday I'll be able to fly with Sam again. So that's the main thing that gives me any comfort. But Sam was a great kid. He was born in Hawaii. I was in the Army, and he mostly grew up in the Savannah area. And he had a kind heart. I was walking with him in Savannah one time, and a homeless person asked him for money for food, and he just, instead of giving him the money, he bought him some food. And that's just the way he was. If you asked him for his shirt, he'd probably give it to you. As a teenager, he raised $5,000 to build a well for clean water in Africa. He was at the prime of his life. He was engaged to a wonderful girl that we were just really excited to bring into the family, and we were just excited to see where that relationship was going. The very day this happened, my wife was out looking at venues and trying to nail down a place for that wedding to happen, and it's just a terrible tragedy that that's not going to happen. And everybody who knew Sam is going to miss him. I don't know anybody who didn't like Sam.
You are in danger. We are only 10 days into the Trump administration, and we've already had the first fatal commercial plane crash in over 16 years with no survivors. While emergency crews are still pulling at least 65 innocent American bodies out of the Potomac River, our president is on TV blaming this deadly crash on minorities and women. So let's not mince words. The president's press conference was despicable, and everything he said was to avoid his own personal responsibility for this tragedy. And make no mistake, Donald Trump is personally responsible for this tragedy. One of the first things he did as president was to fire the head of the TSA, fire the entire Aviation Security Advisory Committee, who are the people responsible for examining safety issues at airlines and airports, to freeze the hiring of air traffic controllers, a group of essential workers already stretched to their limits, and to fire nearly 100 top FAA security officers. The head of the Federal Aviation Administration himself, a man who was unanimously confirmed by the Senate in 2023 for his skill and competence, was forced to retire 1 year into his 5-year term after facing relentless criticism from Elon Musk because he dared to fine SpaceX for failing to follow safety requirements. And Donald Trump took all of these steps to make us less safe while simultaneously hiring a completely inappropriate and unqualified Fox News host to lead the military and an MTV star to be Secretary of Transportation. And now we have had an unnecessary, tragic mid-air collision that includes the aviation industry and the military. So those deaths are on their hands. We should be having a thorough and transparent investigation on what happened and what went wrong, but we are never going to get that from this administration. What we are getting is press conferences blaming DEI. So let's be clear. From the moment Trump was sworn in, he has done nothing but demonize and undermine federal workers. These humble heroes who go to work every day and keep us safe. The dedicated experts who are trained to help Americans prevent and mitigate and respond to emergencies and tragedies. Lest we forget, Donald Trump deregulated the air safety industry during his last administration, putting oversight into the hands of the airlines so they could make more profit. Since then, doors have flown off, wheels have fallen off, engines have caught fire, and there have been mid-air near misses across the station, which is why for 4 years, Secretary Buttigieg fought to hire more air traffic controllers and improve working conditions. But under the Trump administration, all of that work is in hard reverse. There is a value to competent federal agencies and workers. They keep us safe and they keep us healthy. The Trump administration has already told our health and food agencies to stop communicating with the public about airborne illnesses, about disease risks, about food and drug recalls. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to die because of this as well. But the administration's complete lack of interest in our lives is so clearly represented by this horrible airline tragedy. This is what happens when you put incompetent people in charge of huge government organizations or mass fire experts who dare to challenge you. People die. And not just people you don't like. You. Do you feel safe getting on a plane right now? Now that you know that Trump has gutted aviation safety, that there is no head of the TSA or the FAA, and air traffic controllers are overworked and understaffed, and we no longer have an aviation safety committee, and even if and when they rehire those people, their first job requirement will not be competence. It will be loyalty. And how does that help you? Are you willing to bet your life on someone who successfully made Donald Trump or Elon Musk feel special enough? Are you willing to bet your family's life? Because this administration is now putting our lives at risk every single day. Now, no life is worth more than another, but that Army helicopter collided with a plane filled with elite young figure skaters, their parents, and their coaches. People who devoted their life to excellence. Children whose biggest dream was probably to represent their country, and their country failed them. Competence is not woke. Logic is not woke. Safety is not woke. Those are essential, apolitical, necessary qualifications for these jobs. Donald Trump needs to get his priorities straight. His leadership created the perfect storm for this horrific accident to happen. And trust me when I say if we don't do something about it now, it's going to happen again and again and again. We are 10 days into this new leadership, and they are showing us they are incapable of safeguarding the American people the way we have become accustomed. Holding them accountable is mandatory to preserving our safety. To be clear, the Democrats issued a safety warning for aviation last week. The Republicans ignored it, allowed these firings to happen while pushing through the Pete Hegseth nomination as the head of the military, knowing full well he wasn't up to the job. I know politics shouldn't matter here, but they do. And this is outrageous. And if we don't do something about it, then we are all in danger.
We have some updates, though not a whole lot of information on the plane crash in Washington, D.C. It appears that the CRJ, a regional jet from American Airlines run by PSA, was on a very short final into runway 33 at Washington Reagan National Airport. There was a Black Hawk helicopter that was in touch with the tower. I think the tower could have been approach control. And they were asked if they saw the CRJ and told to go behind them, but the audio doesn't have an audible response from the helicopter, so it's possible the helicopter didn't see them. Maybe that goes without saying, so that since they crashed into them, although maybe they saw them at the last moment. There's video from the Kennedy Center that shows the plane, a very bright light coming in with its landing lights on, and then a light from the left comes towards it, and then there's a big flash, and they all crash into the water. There has been a huge response from multiple agencies, state, local, federal, Coast Guard, state police, state resources, Washington, D.C. Fire and Rescue. As of about 1 a.m. Eastern Time, they have found no survivors, and unfortunately at this point, if they haven't found any, it's highly unlikely that they will. The NTSB will recover the black boxes, so we'll have more information, including cockpit audio, assuming that they aren't damaged beyond repair. We'll also have audio from ATC. The Washington airport is closed until I'm told 5 in the morning tomorrow. They would have stopped all traffic incoming and sent them to the other airports and stopped all outgoing traffic. It appears that the CRJ was on a stabilized approach, probably wings level, probably within half a minute from landing, looked like they were only a few hundred feet above the water. They were already below their landing minimums, probably being hand flown instead of on autopilot, and it's not likely that they were looking for any other aircraft at that point. They were focused on landing and relying on air traffic control and controlled airspace to let them know if there were any issues. Obviously, it's a horrible tragedy. 67 people involved, it appears. 64 on the airplane, 60 passengers, 4 crew, and 3 on the Black Hawk, which apparently was a training flight. Still lots of questions. Hopefully we'll get some answers. It takes a few days to get a preliminary idea of what happened, and then months to years to get a final report.
This strategy raises a lot of questions, and there are so many details that just add up. First, let's look at the actual collision. American Airlines Flight 5342 was on a routine flight from Wichita to Washington, D.C. It was supposed to land at Reagan National Airport, which is one of the most heavily monitored airspaces in the country due to its prominence to the White House and the Pentagon. On the other hand, we have the U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter, a P-25 model, that was reportedly carrying important cargo. What exactly does that mean? Was it just military equipment, personnel, or something else? Now, the mid-air collision itself is puzzling because commercial aircraft and military helicopters typically operate at different altitude. Passenger jets usually cruise at higher altitude, while helicopter tends to stay lower unless they have special clearance. So how did these two aircrafts end up in the same airspace at the same time? This wasn't some remote area with minimal air traffic control oversight. This was right near the nation's capital. The air traffic control system in this region are highly advanced, and pilots receive constant instructions to avoid conflict like this. Did the Black Hawk pilot get the wrong clearance? Did air traffic control make a critical mistake, or is there something more behind why that Black Hawk was in that area at that moment? Then there is the eyewitness account. Someone near the Potomac River said they saw what looked like shooting stars before the collision. What could that be? If we take it literally, shooting stars doesn't appear in the middle of the day over Washington, D.C. The more likely explanation is that they saw spark or Idris coming from one of the aircraft before impact. If that's the case, then what caused it? Was there an onboard fire or explosion on either aircraft? The Black Hawk suffered a mechanical failure because they crashed, causing it to drift into the path of the commercial plane. Some people are even speculating whether something external like missile tests, a drone collision, or even an attack could have been involved. Now let's talk about this important cargo that the Black Hawk was reportedly carrying. This term has made people wonder if the helicopter was a classified mission. The military uses the term important cargo for anything from high-ranking personnel to sensitive technology, weapons, or even biological or nuclear materials. Was this Black Hawk transporting something so valuable that it had to fly in restricted airspace? Was it being escorted? Could it represent how triggered an emergency response that somehow led to the crash? These are the kinds of details the military might not be eager to reveal, and they could explain why there is already an effort to control the narrative surrounding this event. The human strategy is another part of this disaster that makes it even more heartbreaking. Among the victims was First Officer Sam Lilia, who was engaged to be married. His father spoke to the media and said the family was actively looking at wedding venues on the day of the crash. Imagine that, planning a wedding in the morning and then getting the worst news of your life by the afternoon is a gut-wrenching. And before just one individual, we have to think about the 60 passengers on board, some whom were youth athletes, figure skaters who were on their way to a competition. The entire figure skating community is now mourning their loss, adding to the emotional weight of this strategy. People are reacting in so many ways. Some believe this was just an unfortunate accident caused by miscommunication between air traffic control and the pilots. Others are pointing out the unusual circumstances and questioning whether we are getting the full story. The presence of the Black Hawk alone raises eyebrow because military helicopters doesn't just operate in commercial flight paths without a very good reason. Then there is the fact that it was carrying something considered important, which only adds fuel to the speculation. Was this just bad luck, or was the Black Hawk on a mission that somehow led to a disaster? Another thing to consider is the timing. This happened in Washington, D.C., one of the most heavily protected and monitored areas in the world. If there was even the slightest deviation in flight paths, the FAA, the Secret Service, and even NORAD would have likely been aware. Could it be that the government knows more about what happened but isn't releasing the full truth? We have seen covered-ups before when it comes to military accidents, and this wouldn't be the first time sensitive details were withheld from the public. The official explanation will likely be something simple, like air traffic control miscommunication or pilot error. But does that really explain everything? What about the eyewitnesses who saw stranger lights in the sky? What about the nature of the cargo on the Black Hawk? What about the fact that two aircrafts collide in such a heavily controlled airspace? Then we also have the emotional toll on the victims' families. They are just dealing with loss. They are dealing with confusion. When something like this happens, families deserve clear and honest answer, not vague statements from government agencies. And let's be real, when military aircraft are involved in accidents, details tend to get buried or classified. That is what people are worried about now. The investigation is ongoing and hopefully we get more information soon. But at this point, the public is split between believing the official explanation and questioning whether there is more to this story. What do you all think? Was this just a tragic accident or is there something we are not being told? Let's talk about it in the comments. Thank you for watching and let's continue this conversation in the comments below. Let us share our thoughts and perspective with one another. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on this story and more. I will see you in the next video.